And welcome to our live stream. Just saying it twice because I'm not exactly sure when we go live. Normally it's when it's about 30 seconds before it says you're live. But anyway, I think we're live now. Hello and welcome to our live stream. Wherever you are in the world, hope this is a time zone that kind of works for you. It's the Friday before the free weekend, before the Baku Grand Prix of Azerbaijan. So lots to talk about, I think. Still, a lot of us still thinking about Monza, I think, in the Italian Grand Prix and everything that happened there. Plus, obviously, moving forward as well, what we can expect in the remaining rounds of the World Championship, what we can expect at Baku. Kevin Magnussen not racing in Baku because he's actually achieved 12 points on his license and he's been suspended for one race. Knowing K-Mag, he's probably saying, yes! No, I'm sure he's not. But, you know, a bit of an honour, isn't it? 12. No, being serious about it. That was all his... That shunt with Gasly. It seems like... I think if they're going to have a rule, actually, if I think about this, if they're going to have a rule when 12 hits and you're out, then they should be very even-handed as to the penalties they give in the build-up to that 12. And sometimes it's 10 seconds, sometimes it's a 5 second, sometimes it's a drive-through. You know, there's a lot of differences, and it's very difficult, I think, for the stewards to make these different calls based on different evidence. And K-Mag probably feels a bit slighted that, you know, his shunt was no worse than, say, that of Daniel Ricciardo and with Nico Hülkenberg, his teammate. But having said all that, you know, he does seem to have a lot of incidents, Kevin. So his place in the Haas Ferrari team taken by Oliver Bearman, so he'll be having his second Grand Prix now. That'll be good. Finished fourth in his first race for Ferrari, brilliant drive, and then he'll be racing now for Haas Ferrari, which of course is his seat for next year. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes, and that of course frees up the Prema Formula 2 seat, bit of a prime seat that alongside Kimi Antonelli, and of course. Oliver won the sprint race, and he's won feature races from that car as well. So it'll be interesting who they go for. I presume it'll be an F3 driver. Be nice if it was young Leonardo Fornaroli, who's just clinched the FIA Formula 3 championship. Not doing much at the moment. Doesn't have a academy drive with anybody, which is probably a good thing these days. And so I'd like to see him get an opportunity, see how good he is. He hasn't won any races in the last 2 years, but he's won the championship. And he certainly showed a lot of Jack Brabham-like fire in Monza. And I say that because, of course, it was that 67 Italian Grand Prix when Black Jack went down the inside of John Surtees on the last corner and then ran a little bit wide, giving Surtees the win. But it was a move that worked for Fornaroli, so good luck to him. And he as it happened, Gabriele Mini got disqualified anyway, so he didn't need to. That wasn't required. That P2 wasn't required. Mini's another driver. It'd be good to see in the car. I think at Baku, he's good. Mini, I think he was very upset after that Monza race, in tears for quite a long time. Kept the helmet on in the area, you know, the podium area, but massively upset that he hadn't won the championship. So he would be good. Dino Beganovic would be another one. He's one of the Ferrari Academy drivers under Jock Clear, who could do quite well. He's probably the most logical if you think about all that Ferrari Academy Prema tie-up stuff. So they'll probably be pushing quite hard for that, I would think. There's a bit of a delay in the picture I look at on YouTube here. I see I'm not exactly in the middle. I think I am now. But so I'm going to get back to my normal platform picture now, so we can just sort of make sure everything's looking good there and bring up my famous questions, box of questions, and we'll go for it now, shall we? First one, Aaron Lee. I'm going to move slightly, so I like to get centered. If I'm not centered, I can't think straight. There you go. Absolutely in the middle. Got to be exactly in the middle, otherwise my brain doesn't work. Very symmetric I am. Actually, I'm not. If I've got two candlesticks to put on a mantelpiece somewhere, I'll put the two together. I'll never equally space them either end of the thing. I don't know what that says about my brain, but probably not very much. My mum's like that as well. I always put the two together on one side. Anyway, hey Peter, when Valtteri moved, this is Aaron Lee. Hey Peter, when Valtteri moved to Sauber, one narrative was that he'd be able to impart learnings from Mercedes. Do you think that happened? Probably not, as they've fallen back each year since 2022. Well, no, of course it didn't happen any more than Felipe Massa and Rubens Barrichello were supposed to take all that amazing knowledge from Ferrari to Williams. It never happened. That never happens. Partly because racing drivers are racing drivers and they don't actually know very much about the running of cars. I don't mean that unkindly, but look at Alan Prost, you know, when he was running his own Formula One team. The professor, as everybody, not me, and nobody that I knew ever called him the professor when he was racing. We just called him Anna. But the great professor could do nothing about all the dramas that team had and the poor handling and the general shambles of the team, any more than Niki could when he went to Ferrari second time round to try and rejig it and make it work. And his one contribution was to rehire John Barnard when Barnard was not really focused anymore on what he wanted to do. And so it goes on. You know, racing drivers historically have not been very good at doing that sort of thing ever. The exceptions, of course, are very few. Jackie Stewart basically put the Tyrrell Formula One team together with Ken Tyrrell and basically ran it with Ken Tyrrell. That's unfair to Ken in some ways, but it was very much a Ken Tyrrell, Jackie Stewart operation in terms of Jackie's nursing of relationships with Matra, particularly with Elf, also with Goodyear, and Ken sort of running it all really strictly and well. So there's one example of a driver that knew what he was doing, and he could really pick his people, you know, whether it be Roland Law, Roger Hill, all good mechanics. Joe Ramirez was a brilliant team at Tyrrell at that point. And then the next one was Niki as a driver with Luca Montezemolo. And at that point, Niki was focused on testing being the thing of the future and very analytical in the way he was thinking and very open-minded in the way he embraced Carl Kemp's early telemetry days. And all that came together Ferrari 74, 75, 76. It wasn't enough to prevent Ferrari doing a De Dion rear suspension car, of course, in 76, which arguably possibly cost them the World Championship because they spent so much time over the winter developing that car or testing it that they didn't actually adapt the car very well to the new, stiffer sidewall Goodyears that McLaren had asked Goodyear to build. And by the time they hit the road, McLaren M23 was a transformed car on much better Goodyears, whereas Ferrari had been faffing around with the De Dion car and hadn't done very much. Anyway, that's by the by. So it was an indication that Niki wasn't always on the straight and narrow, as I say. And then there's Michael. You know, Michael did the same thing, really. He was very good at identifying the right people, whether it be Johan Villander-Pratt or Nigel Stepney or Rory Byrne or Ross or Jean Todt, really, at Ferrari, and putting it all together with good people, looking after the mechanics in a way that they felt loved, and working very closely with Todd and Braun to basically create that period on the Bridgestone tyres when they dominated Formula One for a good 3 to 4 years. And that was a lot of that was Michael. It wouldn't have happened without Michael, let's put it that way. But then again, after that, you're kind of scratching as to drivers that can go off and do their own thing and bring information to teams and transform teams. You know, it just doesn't happen because they're not engineers. You know, as much as the press, and there's a lot of people out there, the media love to say that, you know, if Felipe Massa goes from Ferrari to Williams, he'll take all that experience and knowledge with him. Well, yeah, and what happened with all that experience and knowledge? You know, nothing, please advise. Because it's different team, different car, different everything. So it just doesn't work. So, yeah, if anybody expected Valtteri to take all the Mercedes magic to Sauber, then they don't really, sadly, they don't understand Formula One at all. And they completely overrate the role of Valtteri. That's not to underplay him at all. I've got a lot of respect for Valtteri in many ways as a racing driver, but not as a guy that's going to transform a back-of-the-grid team. So there you go. And one thing I suppose to add to that is that racing drivers don't really want to get involved with politics, and running a Formula One team and getting behind a team in terms of engineering is all about politics. It's all about egos. It's all about people that want to have the last word and want to be seen as the important guy in the water cooler meetings, and racing drivers don't want to get involved in all that rubbish, and nor do many of us either. But that's what Formula One teams by and large are all about. So yeah, all a bit odd and not really our cup of tea. Anyway, thanks for that question, Aaron. Very good one to start with. Big, long answer, as ever. Arnab Das, yeah, you featured, I think, on one of my videos I did from the live stream last week. Arnab, thank you very much. Hello, Peter. Formula One is so complicated these days with 1,000 buttons on the steering wheels. I miss the good old days of the 60s and 70s. I have a feeling that Oscar in the coming season will trounce Lando. Well, it's 2 points there. Actually, I think I've got a steering wheel up here. 1 second, see if I can make this work. Don't go away. Where are we? This is... Here you go. Yep. This is the actual wheel from the Williams OW7C that Carlos Reutemann took to second place in the 82 South African Grand Prix. It's a personal wheel, as you can see from the brand. Frank loved Personal as a company. We did use Momo though a bit later on, but you can see it's fairly simple. Bolted on. There you go. Lovely. So yeah, things have changed since then. I think a lot of us. What was that? Was that a wasp or something just bit me? Sorry. I think it was. It's got stung by a bee. There you go. And I won't do anything about that. I'll show my macho thing. There you go. Yeah, keep rubbing it. Be all right. Sorry about all that. Yeah, so those wheels, they just did the job, didn't they? They turned the front wheels and you got on with it. And guess what? The artistry of the drivers still showed through from something as simple as that. That's what, a wheel as simple as that is what they used in those days. That's what Jackie Stewart, Sterling Moss, Jim Clark, Tazio Nuvolari, basically much thinner rim, bigger diameter, all the rest of it. But just basically a steering wheel. But today, a million things on the wheel. It's basically a little laptop with which to play. Lots of things to play with. Brake balance, diff, all sorts of other stuff. And yep, it's a talent to use those buttons well, but is that talent as good, if that's the right word? Is that talent as rich? There you go. Is that talent as rich as Ayrton Senna's talent for perfectly synchronized downshifting, heel and towing on a manual downshift gearbox? Which is that's what we don't have today, and what Ayrton never had today was, in his day, were buttons on the steering wheel. A lot of them anyway. So that's what they have today, and so it's Formula One's very different. But I personally think that the perfect synchronization of downshifts on when you're heel and towing, getting the revs absolutely right throughout the entire race, and having perfect dog rings in the manual gearbox, is more of an achievement than perfectly managing all the buttons on the steering wheel throughout the race. That's my opinion. One's cerebral, one's more physical. And I suppose a lot of people would say, well, in this modern world, it is a cerebral, computer-driven world. So that's totally in concert with where we should be with driving racing cars. But for me, heel and towing, gear shifting is a part of the art of driving. And it's interesting that if you look at the latest road car editions of some of the rally cars, the Toyota Yaris 4s, Kelly Rovanpera edition, or Sebastian Ogier edition, or the Hyundai i20N, all of them have H-pattern floor on the floor, because that's what a hot hatch should have. And I think they're right to do that. They all have the little revs button now, don't they, for the perfect down blipping. But yeah, it's kind of nice that couple of manufacturers still think that way, I think. So anyway, about Oscar, and yeah, finish that one. I feel that Oscar in the coming season will trounce Lando. Yeah, well, I've been pointing out a lot. Well, I've been pointing out ever since Oscar went to McLaren that Lando needs to be on his toes, because Oscar is a shorter corner driver than Lando. He's got that feel for getting in a little bit earlier, and that's always a bit worrying if you're not one of those drivers. Not that I say worrying for us, but I don't think Lando sees it that way, and he probably doesn't even notice it even today. I'm sure he doesn't, but it's there. In the same way that it's there for Antonelli, he's definitely got a short corner feel as well. And you could see it in the same way you could see it in Nigel Mansell's driving in 1978 in Formula 3. You could see it alongside Brett Riley, his teammate. And that was always going to be the problem for McLaren. Now, Lando's a race driver, and he probably, like a little bit like Nelson Piquet when he joined Williams in 86, back end of 85, for the 86 season, didn't want to admit to himself that he would need the protection of the team in case Nigel Mansell was ahead of him on the road. As number one driver, he should get the maximum points and the team orders would be applied. Nelson didn't insist on that. In fact, he didn't even think about it because it didn't enter just didn't enter his mind that anybody could beat him and be quicker. And I think there's an argument on Lando's side for not letting that thought into your brain that anybody's going to be quicker than you. I don't need the help from the team. I can always beat this guy, and if I can't, it's my own fault. Well, I don't think that's the case myself. I think Lando's earned the right to be number one at McLaren. Certainly, he's the experienced driver, and he's helped the team get to where they are now. One of the reasons the car is this good now is partly, not entirely, but partly Lando's commitment to McLaren and his loyalty to McLaren and the hard work he's done at McLaren over the years. And ultimately, as I said, after the Hungarian Grand Prix race, you don't play around with points. They're very, very difficult to earn World Championship points. And if you're in a position where you're leading a Grand Prix and you then have to be told to give the position to your teammate, then that's playing around with points in my view. And all bets are off anyway if Lando says, which I think he has said, I don't need a team to tell me how to win a race. If I've got to be able to beat the other guy, in other words, beat Oscar. But then again, he slowed down to let Oscar win the Hungarian Grand Prix. So none of it makes any sense, really. I know he would say, oh, well, that was a loyalty thing because I'd agreed to it. But, it's all crazy to me. And Lando has made a mistake not having that in his contract. And certainly now, it's probably too late already, but I think the penny's dropped at McLaren. It must have dropped by now that they think that they should try and maximise the number of points that Lando can score from here going to the end of the year. But it's a bit late for that. As I say, by any count, he's lost at least 16 points. Probably, you could argue, as many as 20 points already to Max Verstappen. Sarosh Soman, hi Peter. Ferrari will be having Hamilton and Leclerc, two of the best short corner drivers. What's your perspective on vehicle development through the year? As in, will it be easier for the team to manage similar drivers? It's a very, very good question, because on the one hand you would say, yeah, that's got to be a good thing because they're both going to be wanting the same thing from the car. And if they don't have, just for example, a really good front end, let me take that example even further. If Charles Leclerc feels that he just doesn't have the turn-in that he wants into slowish corners, medium or slow corners, that enable him to do what he wants with the back end at the rotation point, there's always a possibility that in the current lineup that Carlos Sainz, who's a longer corner driver, and likes to brake more in a straight line with a wider entry to the corner, might say to the engineers, the front end's not too bad. I can get around that with power, and the car's quite neutral by the time I get to the apex. In which case, it's a bit of a battle for Carlos against Carlos for Charles. And if Lewis is there saying exactly the same thing as Charles, which I'm sure he will be, if the car, for example, isn't very good into slow corners, front end wise, turn in wise, then there's nowhere else for the engineers to go but back to their drawing boards and improve things. So that's a good thing. On the other side of the coin, I've often said that I think it's quite good for a team, assuming they've got a really good technical structure and a lot of building blocks. It's quite good for a team to have drivers of both style in the car, because then you're running the full gamut of input and you know exactly where the car is in terms of where you're going with development. And the more information you have, the better. So, but that does require the team to be very well balanced in terms of its engineering and where it's going, and to be very well organized. I think Ferrari are probably getting near that now. It was quite interesting, wasn't it? Immediately after the race, Ferrari announcing or confirming the technical lineup that we knew about anyway, confirming that Loic Serra will be there in terms of the chassis, and confirming that Diego Tondi will continue to run the aero program, and Enrico Gualtieri the power unit. But now that Serra will be directly responsible to Freddie Vasseur, I think that's a really good thing, because Freddie's greatest contribution is keeping things simple. He's got a sort of Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen type brain of sifting through all the crud and whatever's important he can think about and focus on, but gets away from all the other stuff. And it's very, very difficult to do in his position, particularly at Ferrari, where it's so political. And because of that, I think he's probably quite good at being responsible for the engineering, if you like, because he can just sort of look at the really important focal points and not, he won't get down to the tiny nitty gritty of the engineering. He'll say, look, we've got to get a better front end for this top speed. I don't care what we do. I don't care how we do it. This is what we've got to achieve. He'll be quite good in things like that. And is quite good already, quite clearly. And I think Ferrari are going in a very good direction because of that. And that's, you know, people say, when people say, oh, Christian Horner's a great team principal or Freddie Vasseur's a great team principal, what does it actually mean? Well, I think Christian's a very different person to Freddie Vasseur, and they've got very different skills. Christian's more of a people person, and that's why he was able to keep Adrian there for so long. Yeah, okay, it's all come to an end now, but it was a long period of time that Adrian was there relative to his previous employments, if you like. So Christian did a very good job there. Obviously the jury's out now as to where Christian's going to be next and whether he can, there's no way he can do what Freddie Vasseur is now doing at Ferrari and have a sort of semi-engineering type role, in my opinion. But he'll be quite good at having a feel for who's doing what now in the new Red Bull regime and how it's working and looking at the dynamic and the interaction between all the engineers. He'll be quite good at that, I think, with a very good feel for the car going in a positive direction. Anyway, getting back, the other point about Ferrari was the announcement of Jerome D'Ambrosio as deputy team principal, which, because he was at Mercedes, I think, and before that he'd been in Formula E, and that's where he'd sort of got to know the Mercedes people, and then he was doing he's part of it was academy driver stuff at Mercedes, and now he's deputy team principal at Ferrari, which is quite a big thing, and that's good for Jerome D'Ambrosio, and I haven't spoken to him for years. I remember interviewing him a few times at races and also online when he was at, I guess it Mauricia, I guess it was, when in Formula One. But I think it's all reminds me of a press conference that Mauricia did when he was driving for them, or maybe he was test driver, I think, or he was certainly in the driver lineup. And one of the Sky TV presenters was there. And I'm only saying this because it was extremely funny in the sense that it was the most unfunny joke of all time that nobody laughed at, because it was, I think at least 50% of the people there were foreigners, and that's important to the story I'm about to tell, because when he announced Jerome D'Ambrosio in this sort of press conference thing, this is the Sky guy, he said, and now the driver we all like to call Mr. Custard. And everybody thought, yeah, do we? And then Jerome D'Ambrosio, because in England, probably no other country in the world, there's a brand of tin custard called Ambrosio custard. I think it's called Ambrosio or something like that. And then, but everybody just looked at one another. What is he on about? So whenever I think of Jerome D'Ambrosio, I always think of that deafening silence of in that press conference and nobody understanding what it was all about. But he's a good bloke, Jerome. I've got a lot of time for him. Good guy. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he interacts with Jock Clear, actually. Because Jock's sort of in charge of drivers, young drivers, but equally very close to Charles and runs a lot of the stuff. Well, doesn't run. He's there to sort of help the whole Charles thing along. So it'd be interesting to see how that interface works, I think. Probably all right, I should think. Sujith, hello Peter. Monza World Feed pictures showing Kimi Räikkönen in the Sauber garage talking to Peter Sauber, Mattia Bonotto and Stefano Domenicali. Do you want to be a fly on the wall for that conversation? Yeah. I'm pretty sure what the conversation was all about. And it was, Kimi, are you coming to Monza? No, probably not. No, it's quite difficult for me to go Switzerland. Oh, come on, Kimi. It's not, because we must have dinner at the hotel, you know, that we want to go to, and it'd be really good. No, for me it's very difficult because, you know, I'm at home with the family. But Kimi, you're here. You know, come on, we must stay for the race. We must stay for Sunday night. We must have a really good dinner on Sunday night. And you know, no, but you know, and it would be something unbelievably innocuous like that. It wouldn't have been any more for that, I can tell you now. And talking of drivers bringing engineering knowledge to a team, I don't think Kimi would be the driver that would be able to help at Sauber at the moment. at all. But I think it was nice to see the real Kimi there, wasn't it? And it was nice to see Stefano Domenicali there, and his relationship with Kimi obviously is a good one. And it was all just, yeah, isn't Formula One boring? No, isn't Formula One fun? That's what Kimi would have been saying. But he did look good. It was great to see Kimi there. And okay, let's go out on a limb now. Kimi to be deputy team principal of the new Audi Formula One team. Yeah, right. Sujith again. Prince Albert did an interview with DC and Jordan for their podcast before the Monaco Grand Prix. He referred to Charles as a legend, and his time will come soon. He will be Monaco's world champion. Yeah, well, he's not, not creating any new news there, is he, by saying that Charles is a legend and his time will come, because we know he's one of the top 3 drivers in the world. He's the one that deserves to win the World Championship the most, because Max and Lewis have already won quite a lot of titles. Charles hasn't got any, so he deserves the title more than anybody on the planet, really, given how good he is. And yeah, it'll be interesting next year to see whether Ferrari have A, the car, and B, Charles can beat Lewis in a Ferrari. If the car's good, and there's a good chance it will be now. They won Monaco, they won Monza, they might win another race. They've got the sort of motivation and they've got the sort of momentum now that comes from this new engineering squad without Adrian Newey, the shadow of Adrian Newey on them. I think there's half a chance that they will have a good car next year. And if it is a good car, I can tell you now, Charles' biggest rival will be Lewis Hamilton, because it's one thing to beat Carlos Sainz in a Ferrari, it's quite another to beat Lewis Hamilton. And that's what Ferrari want. They want to make it as hard as possible for Charles, and they've done that by signing Lewis. For me, it would have been better to have done everything they're doing with the engineering, moving forward, getting the best from Charles, getting everything on the straight and narrow again, and keeping Carlos in the other car. It would have been much better for Charles in 2025. But they've got Lewis, and that makes the job, I would say, twice as hard for Charles Leclerc to beat Lewis, because Lewis will take points from Charles for sure. Not, I don't mean take them in an aggressive way, but he'll finish ahead of him on the road a number of times, because Lewis will be quick straight away, in my opinion. Lee Kambanga. Hi, Peter. Do you now agree that Red Bull made a mistake in changing the car from the 19 to the 20? They're now having problems. Even Max was saying we need to change the whole car. Well, I don't, with respect, I don't think anybody, and I certainly don't, know enough about the absolutely minutely significant detailed differences between the 19 and the 20. There's a lot of talk in the media, none of which you can believe or is real, but the actual reality of the differences, we don't know. And I have no idea what the 19 would be like had they continued to race it this year with a few upgrades. Maybe it would be ahead of the 20. Maybe it'd be 2 seconds a lap slower with the current aero they have, with everything else. Who knows? So, all I can say is what I've said before, which is that it does appear, the evidence would suggest that they were on the 20 running a asymmetric brake valve, which was legal to the letter of the regulation, but they've now taken it off the car, or been obliged to take it off the car since China. And maybe the 20 was built around that a little bit. I don't see how it would have been, but maybe it was. And now having taken it off, it's just a car they're never going to get big enough sweet spot from. Could be that. Everybody, Red Bull denies that, but then they would. There's no way they're going to admit that. So I think that's what could have happened. Equally, let's wait and see. It's instant news today, isn't it, on the internet? Everything's instant. Red Bull have 4 bad races and they're completely finished. The car's got no chance now. Well, I think you'd be a brave man to bet that Red Bull will not win another Grand Prix before the end of the year. They may not, but the chances are they will. It's not as if their car is diabolically slow everywhere. They did finish second in the Dutch Grand Prix. Okay, Monza, they were not very good. And it could well be, again, that McLaren or Ferrari even are very good around Baku, Singapore. But let's wait and see. Let's wait and see what happens at Red Bull. It is an interesting time for Red Bull, because quite obviously they're not able to, I'm just going to bring this a little bit nearer. Quite obviously they're not able to rely on Adrian Newey's setup talent now of running the car in the field. And so far, they haven't really made any progress with the setup of the car, how to run that car over a Grand Prix weekend and get the best from it. So it'll be interesting to see how long this continues for. If it continues right through the end of the year, then we know they're in trouble, serious trouble. Let's wait and see what happens in Baku and Singapore before we really make any sort of call. And then I'll probably say, well, let's wait and see what happens in Aston. But anyway, I still think they've got half a chance of winning a Grand Prix before the end of the year. More than one Grand Prix, probably. So I won't concede yet, Lee, that they should have run the 19. Another one from Lee Kambanga. Why do you think McLaren isn't giving team orders? I'm sure they're not stupid to be doing that. It must be the contract. Personally, I would take Oscar over Lando if I were to choose my number one. Well, I'm sure you speak for a lot of people, Lee. And I don't know. Do you think they're not stupid? I mean, I was quite sarcastic in my post-Monza video, wasn't I? No, actually it was my chat with Cameron saying, maybe Zach Brown has gone out on a limb and said, nah, I'm not interested in the Drivers' Championship. It's all a load of old rubbish. Sterling Moss never won it, so we don't really need it. But as long as we win the Constructors' Championship, I don't really care who finishes ahead on the road, Oscar or Lando. And yeah, they might run into one another periodically, but that's all good for the sport. Maybe that's the decision that Zach Brown made at the start of this year, I don't know, or the start of last year even. I suspect some of it is lack of planning due to, I've got a serious note on now, lack of planning due to not anticipating that we're going to be this competitive halfway through 2024 and not therefore having any sort of contingency plan built into the year as to what they would do. And here in brackets, I got to say that imagine if Mercedes had had a super quick car in 2022 and 2023, how would they have handled the George Russell, Lewis Hamilton situation? And now back to McLaren. And on top of that, I think part of the problem was Lando, as I said at the beginning of the show. I think part of the problem was Lando when he renewed earlier this year for these long-term renewal at McLaren, had the sort of Nelson Piquet philosophy of life, which is that nobody's better than me, and I can always blow my teammate away. Because presumably he always had, really, and he just out-qualified Sainz, and he certainly did Daniel Ricciardo. So, he was always confident he'd be ahead of Oscar, I guess, and so therefore it never occurred to him that he would need to think about number one status. And also, I think with Lando, there was another thing, that he would find it demeaning to think about number one status because he's a very pure racing driver that likes to think he's the quickest guy in the world if he's got the right car. And not in an arrogant way, but in a self-confident way. And therefore, he doesn't want the team helping him win races. That's kind of how he would see it, I guess. But for me, it's not up to the driver. It's up to the team management to say to Lando, look, Oscar's a different sort of driver to you. He does a couple of things differently to you, Lando, in the same way that Max did things differently to Daniel, and Daniel just sort of walked away, but it was a mistake. He should have stayed there because a lot of things he does better than Max, even today probably. And you've got to realize that Oscar is not even Daniel Ricciardo or Carlos Sainz. This guy's seriously good. And we want to make sure that if ever you're in a position to be in points contention for the championship, or if we've got a half reasonable car, that we're focusing on you, and we need to have that. And you need to realize that we want to help you win a championship. If it was expressed like that, I'm sure Lando would have said, yeah, deal done. Why wouldn't he have, But they obviously never did that. Which is odd because Zach is very close to Lando. He's nurtured Lando from the crib, really, and they never did that. So now they find themselves in this really difficult position where Oscar's this sort of laconic Australian racer who's super quick, very aggressive, doesn't say much. He'll probably do what he's told up to a point, but not for too long because he's too much of a racing driver. And he's also got Mark Webber behind him, and Mark knows all about intra-team battles from the Red Bull days with Sebastian Vettel. So, I can't see Oscar now saying, okay, I'm going to help Lando in every way I can, and if I'm leading any Grand Prix and he's behind, I'll wave him past. I just can't see him doing that. He's too much of a racer. And there's two questions now today on the live stream saying, I back Oscar for the future rather than Lando. And as Lando's in danger I don't think he sees this. Obviously, he doesn't see it this way himself. But a lot of people to whom I speak, and now we've got questions coming in, say Lando just doesn't have the, the backbone, if that's the right word, to be tough enough to beat a guy like Oscar Piastri in a straight fight. And that's a problem for him, because he needs to be strong, he needs to be tough, and that's how you win a world championship. That's how James Hunt destroyed Jochen Mass in '76. I mean, Jochen Mass wasn't too bad. I mean, he did win the Spanish Grand Prix '75, admittedly a half-point race, but he did win it. And then James joins the team in '76, and within 2 races, Jochen Mass is like, a fly underfoot. Same with Patrick Tambay. And sadly, that is how you win world championships. You've got to be tough, you've got to be hard, and you've got to assert yourself. And Lando's not doing that at McLaren, or the management put him in a position where they never let him do that, and they aren't letting him do that. I'm just looking at the light on the other side of the studio. It just suddenly moved. I'm not quite sure why. We didn't have an earthquake then. If it collapses, well, if you see me get up in a hurry, you'll know why. It wasn't a bee sting this time. It was still hurting, by the way. I have to put some ointment on that when we're all done. Anyway, a lot of people would take Oscar over Lando, and I just say this also. I just remind people that he was an Alpine. He was an Alpine race driver until he left Alpine and went to McLaren before he'd even raced the Alpine. And had he not done that, had he stayed at Alpine, had he said, "Nah, look, I've got this offer from Zach and McLaren. I'd much rather drive for McLaren. Of course, they're a better team than Alpine. They've got much more future. But I have got a handshake deal with Alpine, and yeah, they've been a bit sloppy over contracts, but they've done quite a lot for me, and I've done a lot of testing and sim and all this. I'm going to stay where I am. I don't want to rock the boat." Guess where he would be right now? Yeah, he potentially could have got the Ferrari drive, but almost certainly he'd be in a Mercedes, I would have thought. So I'm not saying that Mercedes is a better drive than McLaren, but it's interesting to think that he could be alongside George Russell in a Mercedes had he stayed at Alpine. That would be an interesting pairing, wouldn't it? Piastri, Russell. Then we'd really, well, we see George anyway, stretched to the absolute limit by Lewis Hamilton. So, yeah. But he might have, Lewis might have stayed at Mercedes, and Ferrari might have snapped up Oscar Piastri. This is M.A. Khan, amongst the current 3 great short corner drivers, would you say Max is most adaptable, Leclerc the most inconsistent, and Lewis needing a stable rear to perform? I don't count Oscar, as he seems spikier. I'll take your word for that, M.A. Khan. I think, everybody has their own view of it, of everything in racing. And because it's interesting, isn't it? You go to a party, you go out to dinner with friends, and they're all from other industries. They have no idea about Formula One, you imagine. And then they ask what you do and what you're, I sometimes say, well, I kind of work in Formula One and do this and that. And as soon as you say that, they all express opinions about everything in Formula One. In a way that, if I was going out to dinner and the guy next to me was insurance broker, I wouldn't start expressing opinion about insurance rates and policies and broking. But because it's Formula One, everybody has their opinion. Anyway, everybody does have their opinion about short corners now, it appears. I may be guilty of putting too much emphasis on the short corner thing. The key to shortening the corner, to lengthening the straight into the corner and out of the corner, reducing the corner's importance, if you like, is the ability to do that, not the actual line. It's the ability to do that. You can't do it unless you are super supple and super able to manage a number of conflicting dynamic weights simultaneously. And you're doing that through your hands and your feet, and you're feeling it through your hips and your shoulder blades and your upper arms, and you're feeling it through all the pores of your body, really, and you're feeling effectively the surface of the road, the tire sitting on the surface of the road, and obviously that's dependent on things like, is the tire working, what the surface of the road is like, how you braked, all those other things. But that ability to manage all those and feel those is a very rare ability. And if you have it, it's almost impossible for anybody with that degree of suppleness not to want to use it in the way Lewis, Max and Charles use it with short corners. I mean, Lando doesn't, and Senna didn't. So there's two examples. And George Russell doesn't, but I don't think he's quite as supple as Lando even. And Senna notably didn't. Nelson Piquet didn't, if you want to include him. He was pretty supple on everything as well. And that's just because it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing, like whether you're a left-hander or a right-hander. It's a natural thing like a tennis player, whether he's a serve and volleyer or a baseliner. It's not in tennis. Okay, it's kind of dependent on physique on that. But again, whether you've got that feel for volleying at the net is something along the lines of whether you want to have a break as late as possible and get on the power as soon as possible in the smoothest possible way, or whether you want to just go into a corner extending the straight, not worrying about late braking per se, but breaking down into a transition point. Two different things, but you have an inclination for it. And that's what I'm getting around to saying, M.A. Khan, in reply to you, is that I think everybody, Max, Charles and Lewis, is adaptable. They're very adaptable. And that's why you saw Charles so good on the hard tyre at Monza. When the grip changed completely from the medium to the hard, he got it immediately. Whereas Sainz didn't. He still drove very well, but he didn't. And that was the difference between Lewis and Nico often during the race. Things would happen, the tyres would start to go off, oil would come down, crosswind, whatever, and Lewis would immediately be able to manage it, whereas Nico's sort of system of driving would be thrown out a little bit, and he found it took 3 or 4 laps to get into it again. And so I would say they're all adaptable, equally adaptable, because they wouldn't be shortening corners unless they were, is my point. Leclerc, the most inconsistent, yes, in terms of the number of incidents he's had in the past and may well have in the future. But as I've explained, that I put those incidents down more to the political environment in which he's grown up in Formula One than to any sort of shortcoming in his technique. It's all to do with his head, and it's all to do with not focusing on the things that matter, because he's a Ferrari driver in a very political situation, and the way his career path has gone anyway. That's what I put that down to. And Lewis needs a stable rear to perform? No, I don't think so. I think Lewis, like Max and Charles, primarily needs a really good front end, and he can live with the rear, absolutely. It's when he doesn't have a front end that he's less able to live with flick oversteer at 182 miles an hour on a crosswind than, say, George Russell over 1 lap in qualifying. Why would he need to live with that? He knows what he can do when he's got a front end that he can rely on and that's consistent. But if he doesn't have that front end, yeah, I agree, then Lewis is not going to be, and he doesn't have a back end either. He's going to be not as committed as a George Russell. It's pretty logical. He's a 7 times world champion, been there, done that. But I don't think it's a question of anything more than that. I think they're all equally adaptable, and they're all very, very good at what they do. I've got some super chats. Thank you very much from Siddharth, Srikanth. Peter, loved your video on Keke de Angelis, especially the one in Italian. I was curious, are there any more such stories, especially in modern Formula One? Oh yeah, there are plenty of stories. Who do you want to talk about? Vittorio Brambilla, or Lello Lombardi, or I don't know. There's so many of my friends. François Migo, Jean-Pierre Jarier. There's a driver we don't talk about very much. Unbelievably quick. Jean-Pierre Jarier, really good bloke as well. Really like Jean-Pierre. Jumper, as he was called, or we called him. Tom Price, obviously, as well. And it was a big thing. Who had better car control when they were at Shadow, Tom Price or Jean-Pierre Jarier? What a seriously good question that was. Yeah, so many stories. People need to sort of push my memory and say, well, what was he like? What was that like? And I'll come up with a few. But yeah, there are plenty of those. But thank you for your super chat question, Siddharth. And that arose from the live stream anyway. So thank you very much. Sam, another super chat. Hi, Peter. As Newey is nearly at Aston, do you think it's wise to go with Alonso as number 1 driver? Why not build the new car around a younger driver? Well, don't let Nigel Roebuck hear you say that, because he's been waiting, I don't know how many years, 15 years for Fernando to have a decent car again. So, and I'm sure Fernando is thinking, what pills have I got to take? He's probably going over to get his stem cell thing done now, just to remain forever young, because he wants to be there. You can be absolutely sure Fernando Alonso will want to drive an Adrian Newey Formula One car. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And that means 2026, doesn't it? He wants to be there. Now, a lot of people, like you, might say, well, he's too old. But Fernando will do a pretty good job, I think, of convincing, what's the bloke's name? Lawrence Stroll? Lawrence Stroll, that he can do it and he can do the job. And I think, you know what? I think he probably can do the job. I'm just going to move this camera down a little bit. It's annoying me a little bit. There you go. I think he can do the job. And we shouldn't set rules and regulations on how long drivers can race for. And if Fernando wants to drive a Newey car, I imagine Newey would quite like to know how Fernando goes in one of his cars as well. So, and then there's the other thing, you know, we may all be in mourning thinking, oh, you know, what a waste for Adrian to go to Aston Martin. But the upside is that it'll keep Fernando in Formula One for another few years. Isn't that what it's all about? There's certainly an upside to it. But the downside is, you know, Lance Stroll might win Grand Prix. There you go. I'm actually going to now undo this thing, and it's annoying me intensely. Why? It's not. There you go. I'm centered again. I like to be centered. So yeah, thanks for that. Another one, Steve Hyman. Thank you, Steve. That wasn't a super chat. It was just thank you very much. Very kind. I'm feeling slightly discombobulated tonight because. Why am I feeling discombobulated? Oh yeah, because I've been watching the Acropolis Rally all day, and my mind is on rallying. I've had it on in the background at the golf or wherever, just look at it on Rally TV, which is very good, I must say. And wow, what a day! What a day in the Acropolis. Sebastian Ogier, unbelievably good. Chose some soft tires on the first 3 stages, which were the pre-lunch stages, and then they had the second 3 stages, same stage actually in the afternoon, long stages, 20 kilometer stages. OJ unbelievably quick with choosing a soft compound tyre and leading. And bear in mind he's now doing the last events of this championship because he's now got a chance to beat Terry Neuville in the Drivers' Championship. And it's all Neuville, by contrast, having mega misfiring problems. And then after lunch, it all changed. They did a massive rebuild on the hybrid, on the Hyundai, and Terry was quick. And the turbo went on Ogier's car, so he's now 4th. And Hyundai 1, 2, 3. All the other Toyotas, Elfyn Evans and Taka Katsuta, both hit something, I think. Certainly Katsuta did when he was quickest in his first stage, and he's out. And Elfyn Evans is still going, but he lost a lot of time early on as well. And Adrian Formo was really good in the M Sport Puma, lying second at the lunch break, and then he hit a stone or something, hit a rock, and then took off the rear suspension or front suspension, and he's out. So a lot going on. And right now Hyundai 1, 2, 3, Ott Tanak in front, and Danny Sordo doing a very good job in P2, and Terry Neuville, my guy, if you like, my driver, has worked his way back to 3rd. And I guess if they finish like that, they'll give team orders will be applied, and he'll finish 2nd just to get more points away from Sebastian Ogier. That's what they do. Team orders. What's going on? Not yet. Actually, it was quite interesting because Cyril from Lotus is now team principal at Hyundai, and somebody asked him about team orders. He said, no, it's too early to talk about it, which is a sure sign that he is thinking about it. He's doing a very good job there, actually. Very good job for Hyundai in the WRC. So good luck to Cyril. Good bloke, actually. Very good guy. Arman, out of the blue, apropos nothing, I missed the Malaysian Grand Prix. It was a great track. Well, I agree. I've often said Sepang was the best of all the Tilke circuits, and we should go back there. Why did we stop? Malaysian government surely have enough money to put on the race. It was near the airport. It was easy to get to. Great circuit. Very hot and sweaty, which is good. Sometimes it was torrential rain, which was good. Everything was good about it. Some fabulous corners there. Yeah, bring it back, please. Thank you. Sibby G. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. Did you notice that George and Charles have a different approach to the Parabolica? They don't necessarily have a different line through it, but certainly a different approach. I was a bit confused, actually, because how you approach the Parabolica. Let me start again. How you approach the Parabolica in traffic when you're following somebody is very much dependent on what that car in front does. I think it's one of those corners where you're affected by what the car in front does. And Charles to me is very near the white line on the left going in, but he's about that far away from it, maybe just touching it sometimes. Whereas George, I think, was going over the white line on entry, just making a slightly wider entry going in. That was the only thing I saw that was different on entry. And mid-corner, Charles seemed to want to let the car just run a little bit, whereas George was okay with a little bit more additional steering because, you know, he likes to do that mid-corner. That's all I saw. But both of them pretty good, I got to say. Pretty good and impressive through there. As I say, that, you know, the one that stood out to me really was Antonelli, and why if you look at him in the F2 race, he's really good into the Parabolica, but what he was doing on that lap when he crashed, I've no idea. You know, he was just, I don't know where his brain was thinking, wow, I'm purple on sector 2, I'm going to be quickest again, I've got to get back to P1, it's only 10 minutes into FP1, I'm on soft tyres, go. That's what it was. Completely ridiculous. I don't know what he was thinking, or how Mercedes let him think that. Do we blame him or Mercedes? I don't know. Probably Mercedes, to be honest, because he's so young and inexperienced. You'd imagine they would have been on top of that. And judging by the number of people that then came out of the woodwork with lots of stuff about how good he had been on minimum speed and how fast he was, and he was much quicker than Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and everybody else, that obviously that information had been coming out of somewhere, out of the woodwork somewhere, and it's all completely irrelevant anyway, because minimum speed, not significant. Lower the minimum speed, usually the better the corner, because the transition point is not significant. It's all about how you extend the straights into and out of the corners. As Antonelli, I think, well knows, because that's kind of how he drives. So why was he suddenly so into high minimum speeds? I don't get it at all. Maybe somebody at Mercedes still thinks, incredible, after all these years, that high minimum speeds are important. They've not been watching this channel. Anyway, to the next question. Sounds a bit arrogant, doesn't it? CBG. This approach to the Parabolica happens when they don't have the toe. Most of the drivers switch to the outside line immediately out of Ascari. Charles will switch to the last predictable moment. Oh, I see what you mean. So you're not talking about the Parabolica. Yeah. No, absolutely. The that run out of Ascari is all about, it's a beautiful place to see who's paying that attention to G-force. And yeah, they were two. And I made a note of actually some of the others. I think Albon was another who did it very well. Bottas did it well. Leclerc for sure. And Lewis periodically was doing it when he was thinking about it, I think. Anyway, yeah, just to reiterate what you're talking about is when you come out of Ascari, although it's a quick exit and you do it in 6th gear, I think at that point, you still got to get into 7th and 8th before Parabolica. And the car does reach terminal velocity. When the car's still accelerating, and you've got to move from one side of the road to the other, there is G-force going through the engine when you move the car from one side of the road to the other. There is no way of escaping that. So somehow you have to do that to minimize the effect of the G-force going through the engine, because if the G-force goes through the engine when it's, let's say it's whatever it is, I don't know, what would it be? I don't know, 0.2, 0.3. We're probably talking about 50 revs maximum, but it's still important. If you let that G-force go through the engine when it's accelerating, the loss will be greater than if you let it go when the car is in 8th gear, because then it doesn't have anything like the same effect. So you're minimizing the effect of the G-force going through the engine as you're moving from one side of the road to the other. And if you do what Carlos Sainz does, and you come out of Ascari and you immediately just bounce to the left-hand side of the road, then you're letting that G-force slow the revs. You're losing more revs through the engine than if you do what Charles Leclerc did, which was run it down for the last possible comfortable moment that you can move over to the left, and then you've done it well, and you've picked up your 50 revs. So again, that's been around for a long time now, and to me it's still astonishing how some engineers don't insist upon that with their drivers, because it's such a logical, easy thing. It's an easy thing, you know, it's there. It's like hitting a golf club with the wrong grip, with a grip that's never going to work. It's something that's in your control, as distinct from the swing, which isn't necessarily, but at least you can control the grip. At least you can control when you move the car across from one side of the road to the other, so take advantage of it. But some of them don't. Talk about sloppy. But anyway, Nick Lamoureux says, Piastri world champion next year? Wow. We'll show that to Lando Norris and see what he thinks. I mean, yeah. But as I say, I mean, he will have Lando to beat. That's one point, I suppose, if you're thinking of it from Oscar's point of view. But I'm sure he thinks, yeah, got him for breakfast now, no problem. That's what he would be thinking. Whereas Lando's probably thinking, what is it about this Oscar? Why is he so quick? Probably thinking about it. He rings his engineer periodically. Why is he so quick? What's he doing? Don't get it. I'm not sure the engineer gets it either, because if they did, they'd be telling him. He'd be starting to shorten his corners a bit. But then again, as I say, you know, if Oscar had stayed at Alpine and he was now at Ferrari, what would you be saying about him? He wouldn't have won a Grand Prix, admittedly, and he wouldn't have shown up right at the front of a Grand Prix leading races the way he has at McLaren. But at Alpine, he would have probably destroyed Esteban Ocon. And so, let's say he'd gone to Ferrari and he's alongside Charles Leclerc now. That'd be an interesting one. Sebastian Simeon. Okay. Hi, Peter. Does a Max-like driver have any advantage over a Sainz-like driver on a track with line lock corners only? Maybe the soft inputs, but then Lando has soft inputs, so no disadvantage, right? Yeah, I mean, a driver like... I mean, I said there aren't many corners at Zandvoort where a Max can do what he does and get a bit of an advantage. There isn't a Max corner there, or corners plural. But having said that, there are still moments when you've got change of direction in the chicanes, or you're braking a little bit of load on the car, where a guy with the feel and touch of Max Verstappen is still going to create a little bit of straight car, flat car, where he's minimizing the loads going through the car if he wants to get the car stopped, or if he wants to do a direction change from in the middle of a chicane. He's always going to find a moment to do that correction change. It's going to be different every corner, every lap, but he's always going to find the perfect moment for the entry that he's just created. So even, it's a tiny thing, but over a race distance, it will add up in terms of time management, and it'll add up in terms of not making mistakes on exit or braking too late, things like that. And so yes, he can, but not to the extent that a Max can gain advantage through a corner like Copse or into Beckett's or into turns 9-10 in Bahrain, for example. There are plenty of corners. On most circuits there are corners. Let's think about Baku, for example, where Max would be really good compared with... Actually, if I think about Baku, there aren't that many corners that Max can do what Max does either, to be honest. That's probably why Perez goes quite well there, because it is all about big stops and traction and very good exits from 90-degree corners, a bit like Singapore. So Max is good at all that stuff, but he's not necessarily any better than Perez. There aren't that many change of direction bits in Baku, if I think about it, and the quick corners are all fairly line locked, as we say, or flat anyway. So there's another one, really, I guess. Singapore, last corner is a corner where a guy like Max can be very, very good, as will Charles and Lewis. The last corner, it's double apex left. That's the best bit of the road, I think, in Singapore. So yeah, there will always be, even on very boring slow corners, there will always be something that a driver like Max can do, but it's just that it's less of a significant thing than it is on a corner like Copse, for example, at Silverstone. That's all. But then again, and then I would add, if it's wet, that's when he would definitely have an advantage, always, on any circuit anywhere, because of his ability to feel the grip and manage the weight and be very soft and supple with everything, as with Lewis, as with Charles, and I think in difficult conditions. I mean, Zandvoort is more about wind and crosswind than it is about anything else, isn't it? And that's where Max again was very good at Zandvoort. He was able to use the wind, the unpredictability of the wind over a 10-lap period in the race to his advantage, because he was just naturally feeling the car and what it was doing and responding to it. So Kevin Pryor, another super chat. Thank you, Kevin. Hello, Peter. Can you see Max taking Alonso's seat at Aston Martin in 26 or 27 because of Newey? Stroll Sr. won't sack his son, surely. No, he won't sack his son. That's why he's in Formula One and hiring Adrian Newey. Well, if I can't get my son on the top of the podium with anybody else, I'm going to get Adrian Newey to get him on the top of the podium. So there you go. I mean, until now, the father has wanted the son to have a named driver who's at the back end of his career and who's kind of occasionally beatable or out-qualifiable alongside him. And I think Fernando's done a very good job, because he's done a better, he's shown up Lance Stroll much more than Sebastian Vettel did. Although he was in danger then of annoying the father because he was showing up the son, he's done a very good job of massaging the relationship and being a part of the growth of Aston Martin and putting Lance under his wing and all that stuff, and being a very good, playing a very strong political role, which Fernando's good at doing. So good luck to Fernando for doing that. So if he, I mean, as I said before, I think Fernando will be absolutely flat out in every sense of the word that's the wrong way of putting it. Fernando will be blocking out from his mind any thought of not racing in 26, and he'll be starting now. I can't wait to drive the Newey car. I know Adrian really well. I've never really worked with him properly, and I really want to, work with Adrian Newey and get Adrian to say, yeah, I want Fernando, he's a great guy. And that's what will be happening. Fernando will be doing all he can to make sure he's got that car in 26. Now, I've said before that if you're Max Verstappen, you would definitely want to keep your options open in 26. In other words, if you're at Red Bull at the end of 25, why would you leave before you know if the 26 Red Bull Ford is any good? The big movement is going to come at the end of 26, or 2/3 of the way through 26. That's when the Max Verstappens, the Charles Leclercs, and a few others, the Oscar Piastris, if you like, maybe the Landos, the Georges, maybe. That's when they'll know who's quick and who isn't. And that's when there'll be movement. But until then, it behoves a driver like Max to stay where he is, because why would he leave Red Bull if he doesn't know what the car's going to be like? We know what the Red Bull in 25 is going to be like. It's going to be, hopefully from his point of view, a slightly better version of the 20. But he doesn't know what the 26 car is going to be like. It may be absolutely terrible. Maybe the best car in Formula One by 2 seconds a lap. It's a completely new set of regulations. So all this talk about 26, I just don't get, because there's nothing logical about it. The talk should be for 27. Now, that's my way of saying by then, I think Fernando probably will have decided that he's had enough. He's won his world championship or whatever with Adrian in 26. And then it might be time to stop. So yeah, then Stroll might be looking for a replacement for Fernando. And assuming Lance, if Fernando's won Grand Prix, then I'm assuming that Lance will have won a race too, or been very near to winning a race, because it's an Adrian Newey car, and he's not that slow. And if that's the case, and let's say he's won one race, then I don't think Lawrence Stroll would be averse to signing Max Verstappen, because then he thinks, well, my son's a winner, Max is a multi-world champion, I'm gonna show the world he can beat Max Verstappen, or whatever he thinks. Or we're going to win the championship, and Lance is going to win 5 races, and Max will win 8 races, and that'll be it. I think there's more chance now, yes, of Max going to Aston Martin in 27 if the car is good. But we're all saying, and I've said, wherever Adrian goes, it's going to be absolute dynamite, but may not be. Ferrari may have a great car in 26. They may do. The Freddie Vasseur special. Mercedes might at last have a decent car in 26. From their point of view, and we're talking. I'm thinking now about the Renault engine thing and whether Audi may buy the Renault engine if Alpine go to Mercedes or wherever they go, customer team. There'll be an engine out there that's sort of half developed. Maybe Audi will take that one over. Who knows? Wouldn't be a completely stupid thing for them to do, would it? Take over the basics of that engine and it will save them a lot of time. But no, what I was going to say was that if you're Mercedes now and it's a completely new power unit formula, what you don't want actually is having to be doing any customer engines. You want to keep that engine purely for the factory team. They're completely locked in, of course, to McLaren and Williams and who knows else, but somebody else, probably Alpine. But and McLaren will be very, very quick. But if I was Toto Wolff now, I wouldn't want to be doing customer engines in 27, 26 actually. I'd want to be doing it just for the factory team. And if that engine is brilliant, let me have it for a year exclusively, and then they can have it in 27. A bit like Ford Cosworth, well, exactly like Ford Cosworth, and that's how it should be. Racing's a very competitive business, and because if Mercedes do a great job with the power unit, guess what? They still got to beat McLaren, and that's difficult. Well, it's not difficult. It's just much more complicated than it should be for them if they're the ones who develop that power unit so well. So yeah. It's all a bit odd, isn't it? All that engine stuff. Why? It'd be interesting if Mercedes they can't do it now. They've signed their contracts. But why did they do that? Brand new engine formula. Why would they want to give away their advantage to these customer teams? Anyway. So I've done that one. Kevin Pryor continues on the theme. He's actually talking to Nick now. I think Piastri will be world champion next year. He seems very likely. Norris needs a mental coach or something. Oh, poor Lando. He definitely needs somebody to toughen him up. He doesn't need a mental coach. He needs somebody to say, come on, Lando, get a life. You've got to, get out there and shorten your corners. Have a look at what this guy's doing. And if you don't know, watch. And secondly, you need to not accept any of this. You're the guy that's taken McLaren to where they are. It's your team now. It's your world championship if there's a world championship to be won. My Tin Plate Railway. Well, that's a good name. I love model railways. So does Riccardo Patrese. And Hornby, we've got a Hornby set actually. Love it. Hi Peter, how much are Red Bull already missing Adrian? I assume he's no longer involved with the car or solving car issues. Yeah, I gather he's no longer attending technical meetings or something. So yeah, that means he's not doing anything, and that's which seemingly is a problem, isn't it? I'm just looking at the evidence. Red Bull may say no, it's not a problem. Absolutely seamless transition to the new era. Doesn't seem to be that seamless, does it? And as I said before, people underrate Adrian if they think he's only an aerodynamicist or even a chief designer. He's much more than that. He's a very, very good race engineer, probably the best race engineer in the paddock. So that's one of the reasons Red Bull have got such a tiny, tiny sweet spot now, because they don't have Adrian helping with the setup. That's my opinion anyway. I'm sure Red Bull will disagree with that. I'm sure they will. I'm ready for that. But that's what I think is the situation. Sizwe Hadebi. Hi Peter, love the show. Thank you very much. Why does Oscar get away with so much chicanery undetected? Good use of the word chicanery there. Turn one at Hungary, La Source, and the cheeky overtake at the Rogia chicane that left Lando vulnerable to Charles. Well, I don't know, because I don't know if I certainly don't read much of the racing press or media or whatever, but it struck me, I seem to be the only guy who went on and on about how Oscar had put both Lando and Max into peril at turn one in Hungary. And I'm still amazed that wasn't brought to the steward's attention, because it's one thing to say causing an avoidable accident, which was what they did with Kevin Magnussen and his penalty thing at Monza, because he actually touched Pierre Gasly, or the two cars touched. But why wouldn't you apply the same discipline if a driver creates a situation where the other two on his outside have massively to swerve to avoid him, and he then takes the lead as a result. How can that be allowable? Oh, they didn't touch, so that's okay. That doesn't make any sense to me. And that's what happened. You know, if Lando hadn't turned his steering to the left in the middle of turn 1 in Hungary, Oscar would have hit him for sure. And if Max hadn't turned his steering to the left in the middle of turn 1 in Hungary, he would have hit Lando. And that's why Max ran wide. And then we go to La Source. I think La Source is slightly more difficult to police or adjudicate, because it really happened because of what happened in Hungary. And Lando saw Oscar down his inside and decided to give him a lot of room and ran too wide as a result. But if Hungary hadn't happened, I don't think Lando would have gone as wide as he did and wouldn't have gone off the road, and he probably would have had a much better finish in Spa. So that was basically a result of what happened in Hungary. But in itself, it wasn't. You could take it in isolation and say, oh, well, that was just Lando running out of road, you know, putting the power on too soon or whatever. And then you got the chicane thing. Yeah, I agree with you. Exactly the same thing as Hungary. And if Lando hadn't corrected the position of his car and given Oscar more room, they would have touched, and there would have been an incident. And he got away with it all the time. I don't know why. Because they didn't touch, I guess. That's all I can say. If they'd touched, if Oscar had touched Lando and Lando had hit Max and there'd been some sort of almighty first corner shunt in Hungary, I'm sure Oscar would have got a penalty. And if they'd done, and if the two of them had touched going into the second chicane at Monza, I'm sure Oscar would have got a penalty there as well. Or maybe Lando would, on this new rule they got when the guy on the outside is the guy that can do no wrong. So yeah, my confusion is exactly the same level of yours, says we. But thanks for the question. Desktop bodybuilding. Wow, that's what I need. Hi Peter, can you see Ferrari mounting a challenge with more upgrades for the constructors? Yeah, they seem to be they seem to know where they're going. I think this whole word upgrade has been rather overused in the last 10 years on the basis that it's a word that fits in with everybody's methodology of the internet era and digital technology. This is an upgrade, must go on the car, this is the date, this is when it's being built, blah, blah, blah. But of course, upgrades have been around since 1896. Cars were always being developed and improved. It used to be called R&D, research and development. And some ideas that look good in the wind tunnel and seem to improve the car's lift over drag actually don't work on the racetrack today, as they failed to work on the racetrack back in the 1950s when they started playing around with a few bits of, aluminium on the car. And of course, every team, and I think it's fair to say probably even Haas with their relatively small budget, every team has some sort of R&D development on the car for the next race of some sort. So there's always upgrades going on with every team. The only thing that matters is the momentum of the team and the direction in which they're going and the structure of their technology and the basis of their foundations of knowledge, these building blocks about which I often speak. The building blocks at Red Bull are much more sturdy than the building blocks right now at Mercedes. The building blocks at Ferrari are becoming a little bit more rigid. There's a bit more concrete being laid there now, and they seem to have a much firmer basement now to build the rest of the house on. And so it goes on. Red Bull, as I say, looking a little bit lost, and the house has maybe just had a bit of an earth tremor or two, and there's a bit of a crack appearing in the concrete, and they're a bit of a loss to know how to fix it. And so I would say Ferrari, in the normal course of events, will continue to develop the car in little ways, sometimes big jumps, sometimes tiny little details that we'll never see. But because they've got momentum, because they seem to have a better structure now, because Freddie Vasseur's given confidence to everybody and he's bringing the best out in everybody, and Adrian Newey's not going there, that's all gone, their jobs are secure, I think there's half a chance that most of the changes that Ferrari make to their car will be positive. There will still be changes that don't produce a result or maybe a worse. But generally speaking, I think they're starting to go in the right direction, which is why I feel reasonably confident they'll have a very good car next year. Red Bull, I think, they're in danger now of, let's see, they're going to be developing the 20 for sure in the next few races, just to find out what's going wrong. They'll be trying they'll probably empirical development. They're trying a few bits in the dark. Well, let's try this, because even if it doesn't work, it may tell us why it doesn't work and what's not happening with the car. So everything they're doing to the car is about getting information now, trying to understand where they really should go for the next big step. That's what Red Bull will be doing. Mercedes are still playing around, pushing a little bit here, pulling a little bit there. Is the car sweet spot bigger, less? Why did this happen at Monza? Why did that happen at Zandvoort? They're still looking for answers, and that's a very difficult situation to be in. And they're making a bit of progress, but not massive progress would be my assessment. And they, more than any team, put aside Aston Martin, of course, they more than any team needed Adrian Newey. And I think that, as I've said before, but I will repeat it, the impact of Adrian going to Aston Martin is twofold, really. One is, there's half a chance now Fernando Alonso might win another world championship, and he'll be in racing for longer than maybe even he was thinking. And two, he's not going to Mercedes. And that is, for the team principal and the owners of the Mercedes Formula One team, a massive slap in the face, because that is the team that needed Adrian more than any other. And that is the team in which Adrian could have immediately made a very big impact and taken to more world championships. Without changing too much of the structure, actually. I imagine Adrian and James Allison would get on quite well, and they'd dovetail quite well. And I think James is the sort of guy that could have worked very well with Adrian in the same way that Patrick Head did. And that's not happening. And that is a huge slap in the face. And I think questions, if they're not being asked, they should be asked at board level as to why Mercedes have failed to get Adrian Newey. Now, there'll be a lot of stuff out there, a lot of flim-flab about how we didn't need Adrian and we got a great team and the future is what it's all about with the engineers we have and building a new team and generation, all that stuff. Of course, they'll do a very good smokescreen job. But the reality is they needed Adrian Newey and he's not going there. And that's a big thing. He's going to Aston Martin, of all places. Anyway, Blaze X1. Hi, Peter. You've long regarded the best three as Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen. Who will be the next to join and replace the drivers on this list in your eyes? Wow. The great Kimi. Well, the great Kimi definitely has the ability to feel longer corners, and he does appear to have a very good touch. But he needs to be well managed, and he needs to be not put in the situations in which he was placed in FP1 at Monza, in my opinion. Not because necessarily he crashed. He crashed because of the situation he was put in, where they didn't seem to be getting the best from him as a driver. He suddenly was going into long corners, braking late, trying to have high minimum speeds, doing all the things that are completely contrary to the way he regularly appears to drive in Formula 2 and Formula 4. So I think he's one. Oscar Piastri, I would say, is another. I think he's very, very good. Max is going to be around for a while, isn't he? He's not going anywhere. So I think, well, assuming he just gets bored with the whole thing and goes rallying. I mean, he might go rallying. I can understand if he does, because rallying is such a cool sport. After that, are George and Lando ever going to be as good as Max Verstappen? That's an interesting question. I don't think Lando's short corner, I think Lando's lack of feel for short corners is a disadvantage, and I think George's inputs are just not as supple as Lando's, and Lando's aren't as supple as Charles Leclerc's. So the answer is probably no, I think, in answer to that question. The next generation, I mean, Oliver Bearman looks pretty good. He looks pretty George Russellish to me. He looks fairly, not spiky, he's pretty good, but he's quite long corner and quite, quite into high minimum speeds, I would think, probably, and late braking markers, probably, which is a mistake. I think Felipe Drugovich is very, very good. Last I saw of him when he was in a car. I thought he looked extremely good. Pierre Gasly, I think in a good team, by which I mean a team that a winning team in which they're saying we really want you and we really think you can do the job for us. Let's say Ferrari lost both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis retired and Charles went to Mercedes or whatever, and Ferrari don't have any drivers. So they have Carlos Sainz going back there, and then Ferrari rang Pierre Gasly and said, we want you to come and be the new star at Ferrari. I think you'd see a very, very quick racing driver in Pierre Gasly. He definitely has shortish corners, shorter than Lando's, I'd say, and he definitely has the touch. So I think he's underrated, very underrated, Pierre. The downside to Pierre, like Charles, very emotional and needs some very good management, and needs to be with a very uncluttered, apolitical team with a very good structure. And then I think you'd see the best from him. Let's think about some of the young guys coming up from Formula 2. Isaac Hadjar looks good, doesn't he? Whenever he's always doing something, and he looks to be pretty early into the corners, looks to have very nice touch. So I would predict that he will win Grand Prix. I think he's probably good enough. I think he looks to be shorter corner and softer touch than Liam Lawson, who looks to be, to my eye, longer corner, slightly more aggressive, slightly more George Russell in the way he drives. Fernando Alonso speaks very highly of Gabriel Bortoleto, and I think he's pushing probably quite hard to have him in the, he's trying hard to get him in the Sauber, I think, into Audi. Brazilian driver, very good as well. Very, very talented. Got a lot of time for him. I haven't yet watched him enough to be able to say how I think he drives. I think Zane Maloney is very good as well. And I think Franco Colapinto did quite a good job. I wouldn't have said I would say he's a bit like Oliver Bearman in the way he drives. So I wouldn't expect that much from him. And then after that, I think a lot of drivers have slipped through the fingers, haven't they? I always thought Théo Pourchaire was good, sort of Esteban Ocon-ish, maybe slightly softer inputs. And I've always had a lot of time for Frederick Vesti. Of course, would actually do a very good job in the Prema F2 car at Baku, but I'm sure he wouldn't want to go back to F2. Too much downside, probably. But I think if he was in a bit like Gasly, they gave him a lot of confidence in terms of really believing in him and giving an opportunity. I think Vesti could do a very good job. Definitely a short corner driver. I always felt Alex Palou was very, very good from the minute I saw him driving for Campos in GP3. And it's a great shame that Formula One did nothing with him at all. So he's probably gone. So there we go. I don't know. Let's wait and see who else materialises. But it's a good question. It's an interesting question. Talk about that forever, can't we, in the pub? Well, even the coffee shop, for that matter. Dollars and Cents, good name as well. Supporting McLaren directly supports Sharia law in Bahrain. What does that mean? I'm not quite sure what that means. It probably means all the Bahraini shareholders, does it? And Speed Sports Mag. There were several crashes similar to K-Mags. It didn't seem right. Yeah, I mean, Danny Rick had quite a big one, didn't he? There have been plenty of shunts. As I say, what Oscar Piastri did on the first lap in Hungary and Monza, in both occasions could have resulted in multi-car shunts. But because nobody touched anybody, purely because Lando had the wherewithal to get out of the way, nobody said anything. It's all a bit odd. Oh, sorry. Bearman came 7th in Jeddah. There you go. He wasn't 4th. That was Ignacio Giunti, wasn't it, the 1970 Belgian Grand Prix and his debut for Ferrari. Sorry, I confused the two. Thank you for correcting me. 7th at Jeddah. Thank you. But anyway, it's a pretty good drive. In the points, as they say, on the basis that you get points after 6th place these days. BNNT, any stories from Lauda's 84 season? That was, of course, his first... 84 season. Lauda's 84 season. When he won the championship, his third championship, with Prost having had a sort of advantage into the first half of the year, and Niki wondering how to beat Prost. Well, the thing that, I mean, I knew Steve Nichols pretty well back then even, and know him pretty well now. And I remember Steve driving to Dijon on Friday morning in '84 with Niki in the car. I wasn't in the car, but Steve was telling me about it later. And Niki was in the car. And Niki just turned to Steve and said, okay, enough of all this rubbish. Now I have to beat Prost. Now I think about how I'm going to beat this guy. And what do you think, Steve? And Steve said, well, you know, he's pretty good on this and he's pretty good on that. And you got to, you know, if you're going to beat Prost, you're going to have to think a little bit more about how we get the car set up for the race. And from that moment, he started to take it to Prost. Not every race, not every session, but enough to be in a position to win the championship by half a point. I remember watching that last race in Portugal. I was watching on the outside of turn 1 with John Hogan, who's a very good friend of mine, who ran the Marlborough program basically, and he'd put that whole thing together, and he'd helped to persuade Niki to come back into Formula One and Ron to do that deal. And I remember Niki was, again, I'll get the numbers wrong, sorry about that thing with Bearman, but Niki was, I think he was something like 12th in qualifying, and Prost was somewhere near the front of the grid. And all the money was on Prost, of course, then to win the championship. And Hoagie looked at me and he said, you watch this. He said, you watch Niki from where he is on the grid. He'll be like P6 at the end of the first lap. You watch, and he won't have hit anybody. And Niki was just beautiful. It was one of the best opening laps and first corners I've ever seen of a driver in a pressure situation where he couldn't, you know, he's in the middle of the grid, which is where the first corner accident was bound to be. And there was Niki making sure nothing touched the car, but he was absolutely in position to start putting pressure on Prost. And he won that championship by half a point. Just a wonderful piece of driving. And of course, because Prost won the race, it was just the most amazing party afterwards on Sunday night. You can imagine from McLaren's point of view what that was like. Just absolutely stunning. I mean, that 84 season was, it was a, you know, there was Nigel was in the Lotus Renault, and the Brabhams were quick, and Prost was quick, and yeah, it was spectacular. Yeah, I mean, the cars were unbelievably impressive, and the turbo engines, that was the beginning of the whole turbo golden era of massive power and what the drivers could do in qualifying with 1,000 horsepower. We're getting somewhere near that, and it was just a great thing. And you know, Niki was there. I did actually fly to Uruguay with Niki in Niki's private plane. He was flying it with Paddy McNally, John Watson, and who else? I think it was just us. I think that was it. Ron joined us at some point, I think. Maybe not. And yeah, I spent a week in South America with those guys. And I remember Niki, we were in Uruguay. And it was all a Marlborough thing. And I was invited. Then the days when journalists would be invited just to go along and watch. I remember we were in Punta del Este, yeah, and it was at Montevideo, and we were on I don't know how it happened, but we were on the beach, and Niki had to do some sort of function, and he wandered down to the beach, and he was wearing, like, you know, his check shirt and shorts. He always wore check short sleeve shirts, and what you guys doing? I was with Watty. He said, come on, we go for a drive. And I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. What's Niki going to be in? What are we driving here? And we got into this unbelievably tatty VW Passat. And Niki sort of drove around Montevideo for an hour looking at various sites at 1 a.m. And I always remember Niki driving this ridiculous Passat. But even then, the gear changing was perfect. He never used more revs than he needed to get off the line. Everything was absolutely perfect. And these ridiculous slush bucket Passat. And the other thing that struck me about Niki was that when he was driving, he would be looking around like this. Oh yeah, look at this. Yeah. And he never appeared to be looking at what was in front of him, and yet everything was perfect in front of him in terms of his judgment, car placement, everything was perfect, and yet he was like that. So Niki, for sure, had unbelievable peripheral vision and eyesight. Incredible. And this was 1 a.m. as well. I also did a race with Niki. I think it was 84. I did a race with him at Jacarapagua. Would that be right? I think I did. I think it was 84. And we were in, I'm going to say, Fiat Ritmo Arbath special things. It was, again, in the days when this happened. You know, I turned up, and there was my name on the car, Peter Windsor, Niki Lauda, and the Stand 21 overalls were there, ready. Brand new Stand 21 overalls. Stand 21, what a company. And it was a ridiculous race because the journalist qualified the car and the journalist started the car, and then we had to come in and do a pit stop, and then the Formula One driver would have to run around and do the back half of the race. And I say it was unbelievable from my point of view. I was doing it with Niki, but the risk for the drivers were putting themselves in, it was a completely ridiculous risk to be driving with maniacs like me. I think I qualified 2nd or 3rd or something like that, and Niki was quite impressed. Oh, good, yeah, come on, we go. And I remember I was driving the first couple of laps, and he was giving all these instructions. Okay, left, right, no, pass him, do this. I was flat out. I think I was in the top 3 or something like that. I don't want to be over the top about it, but I was going quite well. And on the last corner at Jacarapagua is a right-hander, and then you accelerate down the pit straight. And I was about sort of turning into the right-hander, and this guy, this German journalist that I knew very well, Jörn Pugmeister, who wrote for German Sport Auto, good friend of mine actually, but I don't think he was a very good driver. Just locked up and T-boned us like you wouldn't believe, and just punted it off to the outside. And Niki Lauda's on that side of the car. It's a left-hand drive car. He just T-boned the car. Anyway, that was it. Niki was not impressed, but luckily it wasn't my fault. So, you know, there you go. But I remember at the end of the back straight, that's right, at the end of the back straight, I was behind somebody, Jeff Hutchinson or somebody, I think. It was quite good. And he said, go on, inside him. And I had one of these moments. Oh, yeah, okay, hold the slide. Yeah. Actually reminds me of John Hogan once told me that he was following Niki. He was in a road car, a rental car. Niki was in front in another car. And Niki had met Hoagie at Geneva Airport or somewhere. And he said, okay, follow me to my house. And Lausanne, it must have been. And so Hoagie gets in his rental car and he's following Niki. And it is pouring with rain. And Niki's driving over this country road flat out. And Hoagie's trying to stay with him, has a massive moment. And it was the days of car phones. And Niki had a car. No, it wasn't a rental car, obviously, because there was a car phone. It must have been Niki's other car. And Nick Hogan's driving along, the car phone rings. They didn't have mobile phones, it was a car phone. And so Hogan says, yeah, what is it, mate? And he says, slippery, eh? And puts the phone down. Slippery, eh? Niki, what a guy. He used to get on, always got on well with Niki. He's a very funny bloke, very staccato. There's nothing to do with 84, but I remember when he suddenly decided to pull out of Ferrari before the 77 Canadian Grand Prix, having clinched the World Championship, giving the seat to Gilles Villeneuve. And Carlos Reutemann, who was his teammate, heard this news, and everybody else heard the news, and he was in the hotel near Toronto, because it was at Mossport. And Carlos, I remember him coming into my room and said, can you believe it? Niki is not racing. I got to find out. And he went to Niki's room, and he came back about half an hour later, and he said, I cannot believe this guy. First time I go to Niki's room, and it's a complete pigsty. It's rubbish everywhere. Banana skin, half-eaten pineapple, clothes, rubbish everywhere. That's all Carlos said. Anyway, there you go. Zishan Asfar. Peter, what do you make of the Loic news? Surely Newey would have been the missing piece. No, I don't think he would have. I'm quite pleased that he's not going to Ferrari now, because I like the way Freddie Vasseur is running it. He's given confidence to everybody. The whole Adrian Newey shadow is no longer hanging over them. They all know they're going to be there at Ferrari. And the fact that Freddie is saying, and Loic will be responsible to me, I think shows that He's got a lot of self-confidence in the same way that you back yourself in the Steve Waugh way of doing things. And good luck to him. And I think it's the right thing. I'm glad he's not going there now. I'd love to have seen Adrian at Ferrari only because of the romance of it all. And as I said, if I could have been a bottle washer at the motorhome in the era of Adrian Newey, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, I would have. But that's not going to happen. And so all marks to them for committing to the team they've got, getting the best from them, believing in them, and going forward. Believe me, that counts for a lot in Formula One and other sports as well, but particularly in Formula One, where the team is so important. And they'll all grow organically now in a very harmonious way together, technically, I think. And I think the car will be quite good. So all of those Ferrari fans out there disappointed that Adrian's not going there, don't be too disappointed. I'm disappointed he's going to Aston Martin, I have to say. I'd love to have seen him at Mercedes, only because I think he would have, that's the right place for him to be. Aston Martin, I've got to admit, I don't have much feel for them. Ever since they built a front engine car in 1960, when everybody else clearly had seen that the Cooper Climax was the way to go, following Sterling Moss's win in the 58 Argentine Grand Prix, and Maurice Trintignor's win the following race at Monaco in the same car. If Aston Martin hadn't seen the writing on the wall then, and then 1960 they produce a front engine car, sorry. What is Peter talking about? Well, history's important. Definitely. You can't forget history at your peril. I've just seen another super chat, colour one. Okay, this is John McLaren. What a name. John. McLaren have a Mercedes engine until 2031. Yeah, well, this is in response to my saying, if I was Toto Wolff, I would have said, you can have an engine through to 157 if you want, but I want them exclusive in 2026. Thank you very much. That's what I would have said. FIA sorted out. Because that's not going to happen. And they can't happen these days because they have to have all teams with engines, don't they? But yeah, it's a long time for McLaren to have the same engine as Mercedes, and Mercedes then to have to beat McLaren, which is not easy, as we said. If you're doing such a great job with your power unit, as I'm sure Mercedes will, I'm not saying that others won't too. I think Phil Prue will do an excellent job at Red Bull, but and I think obviously Andy Cowell will do a great job with Honda at Aston Martin and Adrian Newey. But I always think that Mercedes will do a good job there. And it's from their point of view, it's a shame that they have to share that engine with some of their nearest opposition. Racing shouldn't be like that. I suppose a lot of fans will say, "Oh, bring it on! It's a great engine. At least you got McLaren and Mercedes fighting each other. Maybe Williams up there as well." Yeah, but I'm just thinking it from the point of view of the investment Mercedes make and what they want to achieve. Logically, if they're very confident in doing a great engine in 26, they should keep it exclusive at least for a year or 2 years or something. Tim Hem, look, I like Lando, but that first lap of his, even before that overtake, was just terrible. Really? I thought he did quite a good job off the line and into turn one, didn't he? Let Oscar and George get on with it. I thought he did a good job. Good start for a change off the line. What else was terrible? Coming out of the second chicane, obviously he was all over the place, and brilliant pass by Charles Leclerc at that point. But what else was terrible about that? Or are we talking about? I must be talking about that. I don't know. I have to say I don't agree with you there, Tim, because I thought he did a good job off the line and did a good job into the old Curva Grande, which used to be a real Curva Grande on the basis that there never used to be a chicane between the Parabolica and that corner. You imagine what the Curva Grande was like. That's why Sir John Whitmore gave up racing, because he was testing the new Ford GT40 at Monza in 1968, in the days when they didn't have a chicane between the Parabolica and the Curva Grande. And something broke going into the Curva Grande, and he ended up somewhere near, the other side of the trees, I think, Canonica. And after that, and then Bruce and Jimmy, Ludovico Scaffiotti, Mike Spence, he just thought, right, I had enough of this. Scroopy Noopers, Lando's like an old wooden stove. He takes a while to get up to temperature. But when he's up to temperature, he's super hot. Is that what we're saying? That's why he drives such slow laps, opening laps, or off the line so slow. Poor old Lando, everybody giving him a hard time. As I say, if he had Daniel Ricciardo in the other car, he would have scored 16 points more, and everybody would be saying, wow, what a star he is. Isn't he brilliant? But it's only because they put Oscar in the other car. As I said, they should never have done that. Sujith, another super chat. Can't get, yeah, here we go. No, yes, here it is. Robert Kubica, Robert Schwartzman, and Yefi Ye won the 6 hours of Kota in WC last Sunday. That's 2 World Championship wins in a day. Yeah, and look at that. Yeah, thank you very much for that. And look at the drivers. All mega. Robert Kubica and Yefi Ye, certainly. I really rate Yefi Ye. He's the Chinese that didn't have any money and therefore didn't make Formula One, but I think he's at least as good as Zhou Guanyu, if not better. And he cut his teeth in Formula 4, Formula Renault, did his stint at the Le Mans-based FFSA school, and he's always, he's always been good. So yeah, really good star. I really like Yefi. I'd love to have seen him in Formula One. Great shame. He's the Chinese driver that I think could have really taken Formula One to the people there. Robert Kubica, yeah, what a star he is. Also pretty good Formula One driver, let alone rally driver. And Robert Schwartzman, well, we still keep seeing him around, don't we? And Ferrari keep doing stuff with him. Do they? Well, we see him in the garage and headset on, but not sure he's got a clear path to Formula One anymore, is he? Probably not, I think. So thank you for that, Sujit. Very good. I feel as if I'm doing all the super chats now and actually on top of my game. Probably not. Famous last words. Farzad Jockey. Lewis has himself said that he really likes to attack the corner, so he requires a stable rear to do that. Well, I'm sure he'd prefer a stable rear to an unstable rear, but that's not what Lewis needs to be quick. He needs a front end to be quick. And yes, a stable rear makes the transition all the more easy, but he can still do it with a relatively loose rear if he's got a good front. But of course, if you said to Lewis, do you want a stable rear? What's he going to say? No, I want an unstable rear. No grip at all at the back. Of course he's going to want that. But it's the front. If you said to Lewis, what would you rather have? A stable rear or terrible understeer, or vice versa? What's he going to say? Okay. Finton Mains. Jean-Pierre Jarier, a good bloke. Oh, really? I didn't know about this. Killed a guy on a bicycle. Well, sorry. I don't know about that. That's not the Jean-Pierre Jarier I knew, and I didn't know about that. I mean, sadly, quite a few Formula One drivers have been involved in road accidents, and equally, not only Formula One drivers, but Formula One personnel. Some very stupid things have been done over the years. I'm not going to start naming names, but probably not many people would know of them. Just going to see, as I'm going back to the top of my scroll thing. Okay, here's Tire Smoke, another super chat. Thank you, Tire Smoke. That's a thing from Gunsmoke, one of my favourite TV shows. Hi, Peter. Any possibility that McLaren hired Oscar on purpose to toughen Lando? Now, let's think about the moment that Zach Brown decided to hire Oscar. Lando was his guy, always has been his guy, and there was no sign that Lando needed toughening back then, I don't think. We're talking about the beginning of 2023, because he was well and truly upstaging Daniel Ricciardo, and so I don't think it was. I think it was just a normal Formula One team principles thing of, I want the 2 best drivers I can get. Oh, wow. Mark Webber's saying that we can maybe have Oscar Piastri. I've got to have him. And nobody else will have him, and I've got him. He's got to be quicker than Daniel, without really thinking it through. I'm sure it was that. I can't imagine it was, oh, yeah, he'd be really good for Lando, because he'll toughen up Lando. Hasn't really had that effect that if he was thinking that, has it? So no, I don't think there's any chance of that, Tire Smoke, but thank you very much for suggesting it, for your suggestion, because in a way you might think that would be the case. So here's another super chat. Heaven's Teeth, my last Formula One V10 era. Do I need earplugs these days? No, partly because you're deafened from the old V10s. And your hearing's probably not as good as it should be, but partly because these engines don't require earplugs. In fact, the noisiest cars over a Grand Prix weekend, I think, are Porsche Super Cup, followed closely by Formula 3 these days. So Formula 1 sort of in the background there with F2. What did I see the other day? A big press release saying Ferrari challenge to be support race at the Vegas Grand Prix. Is that news? Do they really think that's news? I mean, bigger news is that Sting is performing in Austin, isn't it? Or is it Vegas? I don't know. One of the two. Here's another super chat. Thank you so much, everybody, for this. Very kind. My manager keeps saying, you should have a donate thing there, Peter. Donate. Everybody has this donate. I said, I don't want people to donate their good, hard-earned money. Why? I'm here just trying to have fun like them. No, donate. No. But super chats, thank you so much. It's very kind. It would be great for regs to stabilize. This is from YNJRBNNO or 0 CM5NEGO. There you go. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It would be great for regs to stabilise for a few more years so we can see a proper Drivers' Championship battle in evenly matched machinery. Well, isn't that an interesting point? In other words, we've got very few reg changes, well, none at the moment, going into 25, because all the big reg changes are for 26. And we're saying now, well, let's forget about 26 and keep it going as it is. But the only reason there are no changes is because of 26. If 26 wasn't happening, the new half-electric Formula One car, which is saving the planet, then we'd be making changes now, wouldn't we? You can't just leave things alone in Formula One. You've got to keep changing them all the time, adapting them, changing them, suiting the new era, whatever it is. Change. Move forward. Update, upgrade, all the time. Move forward, grow. I don't agree with any of it. I like to keep things the same, and I don't think bigger is better. And I think money changes everything, usually for the worse. But that's just me. And I agree with you. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they said, no, well, stop 26, forget 26. We're going to continue, we're going to save money, massive money now, by having no regulation changes for another 15 years. And most Formula One teams will have to sack their technical departments because there's nothing for them to do. That's how we're going to save money. No upgrades, same cars, same engines. That'd be good, wouldn't it? I agree. Kevin Pryor, always loved the camera shot from Ascari to Parabolica, and then the camera follows the car around Parabolica, similar to Cops at Silverstone. Yeah, it is a great shot. And they've got very little opportunity not to give us the shot we want, which is the turn-in shot. Yeah, it's very good. And also seeing everybody coming out of Ascari as well. I thought you were going to say, I always loved the camera shot of Alberto Ascari. But no. Of course, it's called Ascari because it was just after that corner, which was a left-hand kink called the Bialoni corner, that Ascari had his fatal accident in testing in 1955, just a few days after surviving plunging into the harbour in the Monaco Grand Prix in the Lancia D50. And he had a nose injury, of scratch on his nose, but very few other injuries. So he went back to Milan, to his apartment in Milan to recover. And the following weekend, he was due to race a Ferrari GT car in the Monza race there, 500-kilometre race, I think, with Eugenio Castellotti. And there was some doubt about whether he would now do this race. But Castellotti was testing that Ferrari sports car at Monza on the, I'm going to say the Wednesday after the Monaco Grand Prix. And Ascari knew that and decided to go along to watch, just to see how he felt, just to see. Yeah. Anyway, he got there, and it was the lunch break, and all the mechanics were having lunch as they would. And Alberto was wearing, as ever, a tie and his trousers, not braces, I don't think, and said, "Oh, wow, car looks good. How's it going, Eugenio?" And they chatted away. And Eugenio said, "Well, take it out if you want to. Have a few laps. It's a lunch break. Take it out." And against all his own superstitious beliefs, he borrowed Castellotti's helmet, strapped it on, jumped into the car, and went out onto the circuit. And a lap and a half into the test, the engine note stopped on the back of the track, and they went out and found that the car had spun coming out of the Bialoni, and the car had caught the grass curb and rolled over, and he'd been fatally injured. And to this day, nobody really knows what happened. There was talk of, because it was the lunch break, there was some people running across the track as he approached. There was talk of his tie blowing into his eyes. And there was talk of the tyre buckling under the rim and the car just flicking over on its rim. But we'll never know. Talk about ironic. This miraculous escape from plunging into the harbour and brake failure or dodgy brakes on the Lancia D50 when he was running right at the front of the Monaco Grand Prix, goes off at the chicane and into the harbour when the chicane was a quick corner, survived that, and then that happened. And that led to the demise of Lancia, that accident, and then his subsequent death meant that, of course, Lancia had lost their star driver. Ironically, Ascari had died in a Ferrari sports car. And as a result, Lancia, although Castellotti did a brilliant job of putting the D50 on the pole in the Belgian Grand Prix, it was the end of Lancia. They were running out of funds, and Fiat and the Italian Automobile Federation arranged the deal of the century, really, with Enzo Ferrari, whereby at no cost to Enzo, he took over all the assets of Lancia, which was this beautiful D50 Formula One car, revolutionary, groundbreaking D50 Lancia Formula One car, designed by Geno, and got additional funding from Fiat to run the whole thing at a time when Ferrari was struggling as well. So, and a year later, he won the World Championship with Fangio in that car, slightly modified. Amazing, eh? And Ascari's funeral in Milan was one of the biggest ever, still remains one of the biggest ever in terms of the people that turned out and the procession, the length of the procession. Just Italy just ground to a halt. He was a hero in Italy. Hugo Robo. If Formula One loses Monza, it's more of a loss than if Monaco goes. Well, I think it's equal, really. In terms of the stature of those two races in the history of Formula One, we wouldn't want to lose Monaco or Monza. They've all played too big a role in the history and the tapestry of the sport we love. Monaco has been a great servant to Formula One, really, over the years. The only years it didn't stage the Grand Prix was when it disapproved of the formula in 52 and 53, when Formula One effectively went to Formula 2. And Monaco just staged sports car races instead. But then as soon as Formula One got its act together and 54 came along again and Mercedes came back, and that was the beginning of another whole era, because 54 Mercedes came back, the Monaco Grand Prix was back on, and guess what happened also back end of 54, 55? Princess Grace met Prince Rainier, and a new era was born at Monaco, this enchanting princess and the principality, this wonderful Oscar-winning American actress marrying into the Grimaldi family and creating this whole new image of the Monaco Grand Prix, which has remained ever since. A lot of it because of Princess Grace. Formula One's Monaco shop window there because of the beauty and the grace of that family. And so that was a huge thing in 55, 54, 55 onwards for Monaco. And as for Monza, wow, all the slipstreamers, the horrendous accidents, the moments for Ferrari, the important moments for Ferrari at Monza, and just the position of the circuit next to that beautiful park, next to near Milan. The name Monza is enough almost, and the history of that being that slipstreamer circuit in the heat of a September afternoon, the cars going around flat out, the banking, of course, up until 1962. Both circuits should never be off the Formula One calendar, in my opinion. Do we have another super chat here? I think we do. Yeah. Quixa Squid. Gixa Squid, sorry. What are the odds of the Drivers' Championship coming down to Abu Dhabi? It would be poetic for Lewis to spoil Max's chances there before leaving Merc. You said it, not I. Could happen, couldn't it? Could easily happen. Imagine if Max has to finish second to clinch the championship, even if Lando's leading and Lewis finishes second, as you say. Wow. Yeah. Amazing. So many things could happen, couldn't they? Right. I seem to have just got rid of my question box. What have I done with it? Oh, here it is. Got it back. Let's make sure haven't got too much more time, guys. I'm not feeling in any way under the weather, but my voice is a bit croaky today, and I just don't want to overdo 2 hours, but another 5 minutes. Ennio Galliani, nice name. I wonder why they call it Parabolica. It looks like a paperclip, whereas the curve between the first two chicanes is an actual Parabolica segment. Parabola segment. Very good point. Parabolica. I'm just trying to think of the radius of the Parabolica. I think it's always been pretty near the radius you see now, tighter going in. It's a decreasing radius corner. So, yeah. Well, you make a good point. No disputing that. Trouble is, it's always going to be called the Parabolica, I think. That's what the Italians called it. So that's what we're going to call it. Tim Hem. Ascari doesn't care if Lando wins the WDC. Oscar doesn't care if Lando wins the World Drivers' Championship, is what you're saying, I think. Hang on. I've got it here. I can bring it back. Tim Hem. No, I've got the wrong question here. Why is that not coming back? Okay. Oscar doesn't care if Lando wins the championship. McLaren's position is that is between the drivers. They will have agreements if and when Oscar cannot catch Lando. The championship is not really a factor. Yeah, it's all very well, but the whole point here is to beat Max Verstappen. It's not to have to worry about whether it's Lando or Oscar. From McLaren's point of view, they want to win the Drivers' Championship, I guess, and the Constructors' Championship. And yes, you're right. Within that realm, I don't suppose they really mind whether it's Lando or Oscar, although probably Zach would rather it was Lando on the basis that he knows Oscar's going to win a few as well, and Lando's been his guy for so long. But the point is not to let Max Verstappen win the championship. And at the moment, they're in great danger of doing that. I mean, Max has got a big lead, let's face it. And the odds of Max not winning the championship are still relatively small. But as I said, even if you're kind at the moment to McLaren, it's at least 16 points that Lando doesn't now have that he could have in his race against Max Verstappen. That's the point. So, yeah, you're right. Whether it's Lando or Oscar is kind of irrelevant. The big issue, though, is beating Max Verstappen. Scroopy, I'm going to have to probably get rid of this one, sorry. This is Ken O'Brien, another super chat. Peter, thank you for your time. I've become an Oscar Piastri fan and I'm curious what you think of his potential. Can you see him winning a Drivers' Championship or multiple championships in the future? Thanks in advance. Yes, and yes. A driver of that stature, and he's now got a lot of people appreciating how good he is, can now almost certainly believe that he's always going to be in a pretty good racing car. As long as McLaren have a very good car, I'm sure he'll be there. But if McLaren massively go off the boil in, say, 26 and they just produce the terrible racing car, there'll be enough people out there giving offers to Oscar, regardless of his contract, for him to have a decent car for 27. And so on that basis, I think, yeah, he's definitely going to win a world championship. And I think he's going to, if you can win one world championship, obviously winning a whole bunch of them depends on the teams you're with, whether you stay with one team which has a great run or whether you just happen to choose the right team and you can always move and pick and choose the right team at any given moment, like Fangio. That's, winning a lot of championships is a bit speculative, but winning one, yeah, for sure he's going to win a championship. I have no doubt about that. So somebody's saying who? Herbert Williams, who will drive the Haas, I think is what you're asking there. And sorry, it hasn't come up for some reason. Don't know why that hasn't come up. So this is Scroopy Snoopers Bastet. Don't be too hard on yourself, at least you can dance. Okay, there's lots of chat going on. This is the moment when I say, there's lots of chat between yourselves, so you can all carry on doing that and I'll go and take Dexter for a walk. But I'm going back to the top now. It's also when my chat thing starts to get a bit glitchy as well. Another one, let's make sure I've answered this one. Yeah, I've answered that one. That was from Ken O'Brien. Thank you very much. So, let's see. Kevin Pryor, how about an actual Aston Martin engine for Aston Martin? Well, that'd be a novelty, wouldn't it? Because they've currently got a Mercedes and they're going to go Honda. This is Aston Martin. The greatest thing about that 1960 car, which I think Carroll Shelby drove, Roy Salvadori, I think, and Jim Clark was contracted to drive, and it's because Aston Martin produced this ridiculous front engine thing that Jimmy was released and went to drive for a team called Lotus, which didn't serve him too badly. and he didn't serve Lotus too badly, let's put it like that. So yeah, Aston, the great thing about that engine was, about that car, that 60 Aston Formula 1 car, was it was a beautiful Aston Martin engine. But today, it's just off the shelf. It's just a kit car, as Dennis Jenkinson used to call them. Kit car company, that's all they are. So there's a lot of funny talk going on here. Racist comments, religious dogma, please, not on this channel, and no swearing, thank you. Now here's somebody defending Oscar. They were good moves. This is Apophis STR. They were good moves. Lando opened it up for him. Oscar did it clean. I don't buy that. As I said, if you've got through the first corner okay and you're leading the race and it's your teammate behind you, I think you're at least entitled to take the racing line into the second chicane and be pretty comfortable with getting through the second chicane and getting a nice run into the Lesmos, aren't you? Why should you have to defend against your teammate when you've got through the first corner, no problem, going into a very, very tight braking area of the second chicane where it's very, very dodgy offline with marbles and debris? I think that's a bad place to have risked overtaking myself for a teammate. Not if it was, if Charles Leclerc was leading the race, Oscar's pass, totally okay. I'm talking about for two teammates risking the cars of the team. So Bastet, this is obviously this is probably when we were talking about drivers running Formula One teams and taking engineering knowledge to teams. He'd say the average IQ of Formula One drivers is probably 115. Well, on the basis that I think I failed an IQ test when I was a kid at school, I've never really taken any interest in IQ numbers, so I'll let you handle that one, Bastet, any comments that arise. I know, I'm as George Costanza once said, I don't like people who are too intelligent. I can't understand them. So here we go. I'm going to do a couple more questions. Where are we? Hope I've done all the super chats. I feel terrible when people say, but I asked the super chat, you didn't answer it. It's not a good thing, not a good look. Stefan Allen says, Peter, I guarantee you're going to see a different Lando from the next race. Really? Good. Short corners? Absolutely mirror image of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and the way he goes through all the corners in Baku. Mind you, as I say, there aren't that many corners where you can really take advantage of having short corners. So Lando should be pretty good around Baku, I would imagine. If the car's good, which I'm sure it will be, I think he'll be very good around Baku. It's because, as I say, there aren't that many places where Oscar can out Lando around Baku. Oscar will still be very good there because he is so good, but Lando will be right up there with him, I think. Where are we going now? Lots of weird chat going on here. Yeah, too much weird chat, please. Thank you. Yeah, no, there's no more. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's a lot of weird chat. Final Meltdown says Arvid Lindblad. Yep, I think I mentioned Arvid Lindblad. He looks pretty good, doesn't he? He's a Marco. We're talking about young drivers for the future. English, very good, and very quick. So, yeah. Anyway, on that note, I think Arvid Lindblad note. Okay, Will Power and Scott Dixon are still doing bits. Yeah, they are. Will Power is good. Scott Dixon's good. I think Linus Lundqvist is good, very good, and he's a Rob Wilson guy from years ago. He's a Boyo guy, and he's out there just showing it how well he can go in IndyCar now. Really good. Okay, Aiden Power 100 on your Twitter. This is my last question. I like this question. On your Twitter feed the other day was a WhatsApp message. How do you get on it? Well, there's a thing called WhatsApp channels, and you don't actually have to be on WhatsApp, which is a messaging system you can only use if it's linked to your mobile number on a laptop or a mobile phone, which is quite impressive. But there's a thing WhatsApp are doing now called WhatsApp channels, and even if you don't have a WhatsApp thing for messaging, even if you don't use WhatsApp, you can go to WhatsApp channels and, like me, probably be astonished. There's like 150, 200, 300 channels, most of them 2 or 3 million subscribers or followers or whatever it is. And there are things like the police force, Manchester United, the Olympic Games, and it's just full of videos and pictures and text. I thought, wow, what's all this? And so I started my own channel. It's called Peter Windsor on F1, I think, something like that. And it's a channel, and you can just do a link to a YouTube video on WhatsApp, effectively. You go to WhatsApp, you go to channels, and you do that. And it's great. It's a lot more, for me, with my low IQ, it's a lot easier to use than Instagram or Facebook or any TikTok or any of that stuff, which I can't really get my head around. I just find them very counterintuitive, those three things. I find them very difficult just to quickly upload something and takes 30 seconds. It's always, what is it, this or that, and then everything's all over the place, and I just want to be able to do it quickly. And for me, this WhatsApp channels thing is a really, really good platform. I really like it. And I've just tried as well the first of, I've got podcasts. I don't know if everybody knows this, but most of the videos I do, I put out in podcast form on things like Spotify and Amazon Music and Apple Music, and you can see them all there. It's free of charge. My podcast channel is called Short Corners, and it's just downloadable audio versions of everything we do on YouTube, plus a couple of extra things which I'll do over the winter. I haven't got much time at the moment during the season, but I'll start doing some other stuff over the winter, great races from the past, things like that. So I've got that, but then I've never used the YouTube podcast platform, and I've just tried doing that for the first time, and I've put out the last chat I did with Cameron has gone out on not only on Spotify and stuff, but it's also gone on YouTube podcasts. So we're trying that as well. And it looks pretty good, actually. It seems to use the same algorithm as the YouTube videos, which is quite helpful. So hopefully that's good for everybody. It's all, just if you want to. The thing about the YouTube podcast is that you can watch it as a video in effect, but because it's in the definitive part of podcasts within YouTube, and you're listening on your mobile phone, you can close the phone in terms of the screen, but the podcast will continue. Whereas normally if you've got a video and you close the phone, the video stops, right? But it doesn't with a podcast. Quite cool. But then you can easily download it on Spotify anyway. But it depends what you want to use. And for me, I think my default platform over time will probably be this WhatsApp channels. I think it's really good. I really like it. Easy to use. Alex Black, final question. Mansell and Prost both won titles when they were older. Well, so did Juan Manuel Fangio, for that matter. So did Damon Hill. And good luck to them all. Yeah, they can do it. And so can Fernando Alonso. He'll be thinking of 26 now, as we speak, for sure. I want Adrian Newey. I want him on my car. It'll be Fernando. He'll be dreaming every night of working with Adrian. Okay, thanks very much, everybody, for watching. It's been a lot of fun, as ever. Thanks for brightening my Friday. I hope you've had a bit of a smile too with with listening to this, watching this, and thanks very much for your support. As ever, big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to Track Ninja, who support this channel. And they support it because they like the channel, I hope, and I think, and they like everything that's going on. So if you have a chance in any way to support them, please do as well. And with no more ado, have a great weekend. And I'll be back, obviously, with the videos for Baku. Kind of depends what I'm doing next week, really. I know what I'm doing this weekend. I'm alternating between the US Open tennis and the Acropolis Rally. Lots going on. Don't want to miss any of it. So thanks for watching. See you again soon.